Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie. I'm from CRPP of NIE. And thank you so much for taking time to join us in this second of a two-part webinar series on a local synthesis evidence on ICT in education. The first we conducted on 16th of April, and our three panelists, as the panelists today as well, Dr. Peter Xiao, Dr. Wong Long Xiang, and Dr. Wu Long Kai. They shared on the broad overview of their synthesis report, its implication and potential on practice and research. We had many who were interested in more of the details from the synthesis report. So today they join us again and they would talk about how IT inform research and teaching practice at institutes or faculty of education. They'll cover topics which include lesson design matrices, uptake of ICT innovation, etc. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on Long Xiang to start off. But before that, just a quick note. If you face a technical issue, you can write to the email stated here, the oer.pubs@NIE. And if this is a webinar, so if you have any question, we encourage you to put it in a Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. And then we will address it. We will come back together for a discussion at the end of our presentation from our panelists. So without taking more time, I'm going to pass it to Long Xiang.
It actually should be Peter to start.
Sorry, then Peter. Yeah. All yours. Peter, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen first. Yep. Oops. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, all right. A very good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us in our second part of our LDS local evidence series on ICT. Right. Oops. Okay. As actually mentioned, in April, we delivered part one this panel, which actually summarized key insights from our local evidence synthesis report, which consolidated, findings from 126 educational technology studies awarded through the NIE Education Research Funding ERFP, EduLab, and MOE Academies Fund from 2008 to 2017. The focus was on the important findings and policy and practical implications on leveling up and reshaping technology-enhanced learning in the K-12 settings in this new education normal. For this particular panel, or this part two, we will shift the focus to present our synthesis of evidence and providing recommendations towards how as academic, what are the academic directions that can be taken in the use of ICT in teaching practices within institutes and faculties of education. So as ICT will continue to advance in an ever-changing world, it's actually very important for teachers and educators and educational researchers to constantly renew our understanding of and exploring new possibilities to improve and transform the ICT ecology in the education system. Right. So what we did was that we took an ecological approach to our synthesis by looking at three parts, actually the pedagogical practices and student learning with ICT, which is the center, and surrounding it, how do teachers enact this, and we look into the teachers' capacity building with ICT, and surrounding it, teachers the school, how does school and stakeholders support even the use of ICT in the educational system. So our starting point for the synthesis, the ICT can be an enabler to improve learning and teaching in the Singapore classrooms and beyond. Then if so, what we ask that based on the corpus of 126 funded studies, then what are the techno-pedagogical practices that have been enacted to transform teaching and learning in Singapore through the use of ICT? So this at the center, we look at these technological practices and student learning supported by this ICT. So surrounding it, then if there are actually all these techno-pedagogical practices being enacted in our classrooms through the use of ICT. Then our next layer is how do teachers then build this capacity? So we examine how teachers learn to use ICT to innovate these pedagogical practices, and what are these transformations in these practices. So lastly, we look at what the systemic support such as leadership is needed for teachers to design and enact pedagogical practices. Thus, our LES actually look into school structures and the role of stakeholders and educational system to support the development of innovative techno-pedagogical practices. This is just an overview of what we did in our studies, our 126 studies. So this slide shows the number of ICT-related projects awarded through the ERFP, EduLab, and MEF projects that were completed from 2008 to 2017. So actually from tranche 2 projects actually ran from 2008 to 2012, while the tranche 3 projects ran from 2013 to 2017. So from this, actually 126 projects were identified from studies between this time. Actually, we focus on this locally funded school-based projects with ICT outcomes that actually showed ICT innovations or improvement in teaching practices. Also, we look into the qualitative and quantitative evaluation component with information on evaluation being used in the studies. So this actually just to give you an overview of the different studies that we covered in our synthesis. Next, I would like to pass the time to Long Kai, who actually will share with us our first key insight.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to join this session. So in my part, I would like to talking about the affordances of ICT for the benefits for student learning. So I think a key affordance we have found from this study is that actually ICT has afforded students to go beyond the classroom, and then they have been given more learning pathways by connecting classroom and out of classroom context by using ICT. For example, like they can be using the ICT tools in the real world, can help them to augment so-called authentic learning, particularly with the aid of social media. And for example, they can be using, be placed in the working environment, and they use the digital learning tools. It can be iPad, it can be all the other ICT tools. And then this kind of affordances has made the learning to be anytime and to be anywhere. And the use of outside of school media has also helped them to make a stronger connection between what they need to learn, for example, physics, with their everyday life. And this kind of like some other platforms like Google Sites, like Edmodo, so can support the so-called direct learning and the collaborative learning among the students. So this kind of so-called salient affordance of social media can make it suitable for capturing the students' knowledge, applications, and knowledge representations. So as well as enabling so-called cross-contextual knowledge, co-construction, and the formative assessment. So this is something we have found from the current projects. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this one we can see that online learning has been made easier and more accessible with the use of ICT tools. So especially we can see that nowadays we are all talking about home-based learning. So actually from the previous studies, we have identified several previous projects as already working on this kind of home-based learning. And they have also been talking about, okay, learning can be really be put out of the classrooms, and it can happen at homes. So this studies has been done before, and it can actually bring certain insights for the current situation. So we can learn from the previous projects, and we can also identify the so-called flipped learning. So flipped learning has been possible, like because flipped learning, you know that it involves home-based learning at the start and reverse the traditional classroom practices, right? Because the students can watch the recorded lectures as homework, then use the pressures in class time for higher level tasks. So this can also be happening in our previous studies. All these kind of lessons can really be helping us be coping with the current challenges. Definitely, we are also notice certain issues when the students or ICT can be introduced in the school's hands, right? They experience certain frustrations and certain difficulties when they are using the ICT, and I think all these kind of issues should also be notable for our current situation. Okay, thank you. Next one.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, so this should be my part. So I come to the teachers domain. We talk about in our analysis of all these studies I've done. We see this kind of teachers' roles. We're being split them into these three types of roles and responsibilities in all these ICT studies. We see the first type, teachers just as inventors, that mainly will be the researchers who actually take the lead. Researchers come up with the full solution, and what the teachers do is that they just do a little bit of training and then just try to follow whatever researchers tell them to do, try to reach a kind of a high fidelity. So there's a little space for the teachers to customize. So it means that of course they still play a role, especially at the proof of concept stage. Maybe it's up to individual these are PIs or researchers to decide to what extent they want to give teachers some sort of autonomy to tweak, to adapt. So in many cases, in these 8 studies, actually what we saw is that so the teachers are given a very little space to customize. It doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, just that it happened to be a research decision. And then we come to teachers as a co-designers, 38 of them, 38 studies come out of them. They're either the teacher can, maybe they spearhead or involved in developing pedagogical resources. Yeah, but they are not involved in research-related tasks. Maybe let's say we have a researchers who actually lead the entire study, but then they give teacher greater autonomy. Let's say you can design lesson plans, you can design learning resources, learning materials, all these things, but then they are not quite involved in research-related tasks. They just facilitate, let's say, data collection, but they do not go further more than that. So they might be able to provide inputs to researchers in design, and that actually helped the teachers to build design capacities, which will later maybe, even if at the end the teachers didn't adopt the entire solution from the researchers to carry on from the study, but actually they learn from this all this process, they learn something, and then they can actually impact their own instructions. So this is something that we see the kind of value of that, even if the teacher is not actually the one who spearhead the entire activities. And then we come to the third type, teachers as either researchers themselves or as co-researchers. 25 studies come on that, especially we have this EduLab funding, EduLab funds, where even K-12 teachers are allowed to be PIs, and compared to, a few others like ERIP. ERIP is mainly for researchers to run that. So what happens is that teachers can be, maybe they have an idea, they just apply for fund and do a very applied-oriented kind of study, or maybe they still help researchers. They still playing a supporting role to researchers who are running the show, but then they help the student to help the researcher to problematize the study, to help the teachers, researchers, not only to collect, but also help them to analyze data. And they can actually develop nuanced understanding of student learning beyond just designing lesson plan, enacting lesson plan, or designing resources for that purpose. So this is something that ideally we want to iterate. So the teacher will stay there. At the end of this cycle, we continue. They learn from there, they make reflection, and then they improve the design, then come back to do it again. Yeah, so we want to help it to iterate, to improve the implementation. This is something that is, we see very few projects that are doing that, but this is direction that I think we should move towards. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, so for this case, we want to see this from teachers. Just now I talked about how teachers can be involved. These are in-service teachers. They can be involved in our studies, or they can even spearhead ICT studies. But now we come to this part about teacher education, either pre-service. For this one, I'm mainly talking about pre-service teachers education, but they can also be applied to in-service teachers. These are PD. So we have this deployment of ICT-based environment and lesson design matrix to enhance teacher learning. We look at the first case, we look at this. There are some digital curriculum and packages of resources being developed. There are 4 studies. So this bracket we show the number of studies which did that. Either they come up with, let's say, they come up with a video. Say, for example, we have a study, actually not only one, there are 2 studies on this. They are doing this kind of classroom management courses. Yeah, for pre-service teachers. So what happened is that they design, instead of just reading some of the text talking about some of the very static way of talking about some of the scenarios, how about we show some videos, show some video clips to enact some of these classroom situation, and the teacher is supposed to comment on it, to suggest ways to improve it, to rectify the problems. Yeah, so these are something that they can do. And also we have come up with this rubrics for teachers, self-assessment of lesson designs. There are 2 studies did that. The first one, actually, there's a more extensive study, which actually there are multiple projects on this, run by our former colleague. She already left NIE. She used to be with us, and then she actually developed a rubric for teachers based on ICT for Meaningful Learning framework proposed by David Jonathan, and also TPAC framework. Yeah, you know TPAC framework like this. So they actually put together these 2 frameworks, yeah, to underpin the design of a rubric. And this rubric is actually for teachers, not for assessing teachers and not for assessing students. Assessing teachers' lesson plan design, and maybe you can use it to assess the teachers' learning, teaching practice as well. So they come up with several different. I think there are 5 different criteria in this rubric, all mapped to this meaningful learning framework. And the teachers can use it to self-evaluate the lesson plans they design, to make sure that they follow these 2 frameworks to design the practice. So another example is actually my own study, because I've been running similar learning project for quite a while, and then in one of the latest project which already closed, I developed a rubric. Yeah, actually, I would say I'm inspired by the colleague Joyce Cole, who developed this TPAC rubric. So I developed this one, which is that I based on five design principles of seamless science learning. Yeah, I convert them into a rubric so that the teacher can also self-evaluate the lesson plans they design. So this is something that I think for the rest, everybody else can continue to do that, which is something that the recommendation part, maybe I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. Yeah. So, and we also have this webcast course. I realized that there's one study on an ECSC, which is our former early childhood and spatial education academic group of NIE. They developed a webcast course. If you know what webcast is, they developed a webcast course not only for teachers as a medium for the teacher to learn to learn this particular course, but also they get the teacher to design webcast courses for their future students. Yeah, so this is something that they can do. And finally, we have an e-portfolio at NIE. E-portfolio at NIE, for those who are probably not familiar with this initiative. Actually, NIE have this initiative for more than 10 years. What happens is that this is applied to our pre-service teachers. whenever they maybe some of them actually they take a 2 years course or 4 years course, and earlier time we also have 9-month course actually, but later we extended it. So no matter how much, how many years you're going to stay there, you're going to, every student is supposed to maintain their own learning e-portfolio, which for every course they take in NIE, they're supposed to kind of pool resources, pool all this their works, digital works, or in this e-portfolio, so that they maintain this e-portfolio and improve from them, and maybe they use it for their own self-assessment purpose. And by the end of their study here, before they graduate, they're supposed to present their e-portfolio as a whole, to show that the kind of their learning journey throughout the time they stay in NIE. And although this is not mandatory, but actually our NIE will actually we kind of encourage them to continue to maintain their e-portfolio even after they left NIE and then they join the teaching force. So these are things I've done, and then there are some studies, some two research study actually is actually more on interview teachers as well as get the teacher to do some survey, which is to study some of their behaviors, their psychological reactions. So these two e-portfolio, the way they're doing e-portfolio. So it's not quite the kind of an intervention study, but more on studying how our pre-service teachers their perception on e-portfolio and the way they maintain their e-portfolio, and whether they find it useful and so on and so forth, and how they're actually using it. So this is then essentially the 4 types of studies we found relevant to pre-service teachers' education. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this slide actually I showed it in the last session, last part of our panel, but then so I won't go into too much detail, but this is relevant to a recommendation I'm going to make later. So I just give you a kind of try to refresh your memory. But for those who didn't attend the last one, which is also benefit them, we found that when we study all this, we analyze all these projects where the teachers' involvement in the studies, school teachers, K-12 teachers involved in the study, we found that they have these 4 types of challenges. They try to negotiate the challenges in adapting innovative pedagogical practice, not only during the research period, but also during their day-to-day teaching. What are the challenges they're facing, and they need to negotiate it. Their role in negotiation, because they are the teachers, there are a lot of things to do. How can they handle this? There are 8 studies who actually I'm not saying that they're addressing these issues, but they found these issues. We also have time negotiation, because teachers too much time, and then too much things they need to do. They don't have time to actually trying to do a deep. Many teachers, they don't have time to do a kind of deep integration of ICT in their teaching, and also because their curriculum, their national curriculum, they need to cover. That's also competing issues. And also traditional versus 21st century learning and negotiation. Although we see ICT as the kind of catalyst to move towards 21st century learning, but usually if many teachers, they are still they are used to and they stick to their traditional way of teaching. Maybe they still use ICT for those purposes. They just stick to their way, just change more. They just change the medium of learning, but they still teaching in the same way. So this is the kind of challenges we are facing. And finally, there are other contextual factors such as the infrastructure issue and so on and so forth. There are 9 studies now. We have these issues. So we can see time negotiation and these are learning philosophy negotiation. These are the 2 major issues that most of the studies that they've been facing. Okay, next slide. I think that should be Peter's for the next slide. Okay, this is still mine. So I just show this kind of 4 types of because we try to map these 4 types of challenges into these 4 major factors. So we actually try to consolidate and come up with these 4 factors: teachers' belief and perceptions, systemic requirements. Teachers' belief and perception, they may be affected by systemic requirement, like say for example, national syllabus, or they perceive national syllabus one day to do it that way. They perceive that the school management want them to do it that way, but actually it's not the case, but many of them are actually mistaken. So this could be an issue. And then there are also teachers PD and teacher learning and teachers PD may affect the teacher's belief and perception when we look at the arrows. Yeah. And eventually all this may even affect their teaching practice. So all these three other elements will affect their teaching practice. And we try to map these 4 types of challenges into these arrows. You can see this kind of mapping there. You can read our full report for more details about this analysis. Okay, next slide. That should be Peter's one now.
Hi, I'd like to share, I think, from system perspective, I think some of our key insights. From our LAS, I think our corpus of studies also included like large-scale studies, and also I think studies like the EduLab, where actually teachers wrote down their reflections on their research. And from our analysis, we found that actually teachers actually reported the importance even of school leaders giving them a clear direction on the use of ICT, and this had a positive effect on them, even key personnel and teachers. So what we found is that teachers, in our studies, we found that teachers shared about the importance of the whole school approach of ICT integration and the critical roles that the school leaders play in setting the direction. There are several ways that teachers, school leaders do that. I think first, we found that actually school leaders set up clearly what the school's goals and vision in teaching and learning with ICT. So this also may include the integration or use of ICT also in various aspects of school functions, just as in administration, teaching and learning also. And what we also found that actually many schools actually use existing framework in the system, like from Ministry of Education, to align the use of ICT to the school direction. So instead of coming a new framework and all that, so actually they use existing framework that teachers are already familiar with, and they try to align it. Okay, so for example, school teachers adopted the iConnect framework, which was well aligned to the Master Plan 3 goals to foster self-directed learning and collaborative learning among students. Right. So the school leaders also set a clear mandate on the use of innovative teaching strategies, emphasizing the use of pedagogical applications of ICT. So it's not just merely using ICT for the sake of ICT. So there was already a strong emphasis on the pedagogical use of ICT. So this could be examples of this could be the use of ICT to make students thinking visible in the classroom or promote collaborative learning. So these goal statements we found also cascaded through the schools at different levels for action. All right, so what this one does is actually it creates this alignment of goals from the school leaders to the middle managers and to the teachers who actually enact all this in the classroom. So for example, the instructional program department level, and take care of the subjects, departments heads will actually translate these goals and tasks to integrate ICT into the curriculum for the main subject. So actually this could be a level-wide type of integration in the curriculum, right? So actually an integration ICT in the lessons are then enacted even by the teachers. So in Singapore schools, the Ministry of Education has already put forth ICT frameworks for school adoption, which actually school leaders can actually leverage. Also, as school leaders are empowered, also we found actually school leaders empower their departments to much sense when they cascade it to set the goals of ICT use. And they also orchestrated not only that, but efforts at the school levels to make sure that the separate ICT departments, I mean the different departments, subject departments and ICT even have the available resources, and then they also will probably work with researchers and bring in researchers even to work with school teachers. So much of this was left the prerogative also to the ownership or the department heads. So we found that actually when all this are done with a clear direction, the alignments and all that are actually very important even to the teachers enacting and integrating ICT into the classroom. Also what we found was that similar actually they involve leaders at different levels towards a pervasive use. So we just want to actually elaborate this further. All right. So what we also found that, because we think this is an important point, but probably that probably we can apply this even in the higher learning institutes or in the schools, that actually teachers, the school leaders use a very distributed leadership to implement the pervasive use of ICT in the school. So at multiple levels, translating the school direction to use ICT into teaching and learning practices, right? So they, at the same time, they promote ownership of the innovation at different levels. So what we found was that there was actually a sort of two-pronged top-down, bottom approach to integrate ICT, right? So actually from the top, actually the school leaders adopted a multi-level leadership to encourage ownership of ICT integration by different departments. And also, we found that also in some schools, there were actually different layers, like there was the principal, the HODs or the IP heads, and also the ICT champion. So the IP heads actually play a very critical role in translating, as we mentioned earlier, into actionable steps even for the teachers. So, and what we also found was that they provided what I call instructional leadership. They gave the teachers direction and guidance in the implementation of ICT in the curriculum. And also some schools, they also had this ICT champion, which encouraged the innovation ICT use, and they also create actually buy-in from the teachers. So they model actually what good approaches are in using ICT and to demonstrate how ICT can be used for teaching. And also some schools even have project coordinators to coordinate even teaching resources and pool teaching resources even for the teachers. So we also found that actually teacher leadership also at the same time emerged as teachers were tasked to take even leading roles in implementing school-based curriculum design. So this was another form of teacher leadership to encourage ownership, even for the teachers to initiate projects. So in our studies, we have actually many EduLab projects and MF projects, which were examples of in which school leaders actually encourage teachers to innovate ICT and support their teachers in the submission of these proposals. And they allow actually teachers to look into problems of practice in the classroom and to really think about how ICT can solve these problems of practice in the classroom. So in a way, it was actually, in a way, the kind of bottom up the process of, you see teachers innovating, and that innovation, as they are innovating, will actually scale up even from classroom to the levels and even to the whole school. So that's why we found even as the importance of how actually school as a system can support teachers' innovation. I'll pass the time now back to Long Xiang. Sorry, Long Kai.
It's actually Long Kai. Yeah.
Okay.
Long Kai.
Okay. So just now we have shared about this kind of affordances of ICT that has helped this learning to happen outside of the classroom, right? So that's why we actually we all know that the technologies are actually evolving very fast. Now the AI, now the learning analytics, virtual and augmented realities, or Internet of Things, all these kind of new technologies are emergent. So in terms of the constructing of future classrooms, so we should be further leveraging on the emergent technologies that can extend the student learning beyond the traditional classroom, and then we can achieve a more holistic and personalized learning. So this kind of like all these technologies, all new technologies will open up new opportunities for the construction of the future classrooms or future learning environment. So we can call it as like a future ready smart learning environment. So this can extend the learning, student learning beyond the physical classrooms and become more holistic, become more personalized. And we also need to be like connecting emotional environment data with learning analytics, or analyze students' learning progress and provide just-in-time support to teachers. So as we all know that now there's a new term or new subject called as science of learning, right? And then we are talking about how to be analyzing or be improving learning with the power of AI, or even we can be connecting some kind of emotional or this kind, or even some brain data of the students. All this kind of feedback, or all this kind of information or more find data will be helping educators, will be helping researchers in better understanding how students has been learning, has been learned, right? And all this kind of technologies can be helping us in getting certain so-called hard evidence instead of previously we are just talking about the survey data or talking about this kind of some so-called most of the data, right? And by using the new technologies, some hard evidence can be connected, and then we can using this kind of data by helping the students to learn better. We are also talking about how to provide differentiate instructions in the classroom. It's like when the teachers have a better understanding how the students have learned during the process, can in the classroom, can in the outside of classroom, settings, right? In a different context, right? And then the students will be better known how the students can learn better, right? In terms of different grades, different levels, different personalities, different learning styles. All this kind of data can be helping the student, helping the teachers to improving the instruction measures, and then to improving the teaching practice. So that's our recommendation in terms of student learning by using ICT. Next one. Peter.
Okay, come to this part is about teacher related, how our further our research on harnessing ICT to enhance or transform teacher learning. We look at this local research gap in this aspect. Yeah. So although this aspect, I believe that in the rest of the world there are actually plenty of study, but over here there are only 5 studies for interventionists, and the rest were evaluative studies. Just now, let's say when I talk about the part about studying about e-portfolio, NIE's learning e-portfolio. That one is more evaluative study. Yeah, based on they want to study the students' perception because these are e-portfolio they are already implementing. So this is not something that we're trying to change the way of running, but it's only studying the impact. And there are only 5 interventionist studies, including the 2 of them were actually on just now I talked about that about development of the rubrics, which is we call it the matrix to help the teachers to self-evaluate, or developing learning resources for the teachers to use. Yeah, ICT-based learning resources. So we want to do more than that. Say, for example, smart technologies. Again, we want to transform teacher learning. Like just now I talked about, we have videos to be used to enact some of the classroom management scenarios for the teachers. How about we do interactive video rather than a static video story? And then you look at it, you finish watching the video and then you just comment on the story. How about we make it more interactive? Can we do virtual environment or even simulation? So that's scenario-based learning. And then we're talking about this. How about we do problem-based learning? We use authentic teaching scenarios identified by learning analytics. So that means that there are already learning analytics running in place in the authentic classroom. And then from there, maybe they're able to come up with some extract some of the scenarios which actually need teachers' attention. So it's not just for the teachers who are using that learning analytics system to do something on their actual students. Can we actually extract that piece of information and design problem-based learning out of that? Problem-based learning activities out of that. And also, maybe we can use AI to scaffold to provide decision support on lesson designs, lesson planning. Yeah, either they use theory or design, rubric-based, rooted. Just now I already talked about we have rubrics for teachers, but the teachers are supposed to read the rubrics and then they self-evaluate. Based on that, they self-evaluate the lesson plan. How about can we actually support that part of that decision making being supported by AI? So there's something that we can look into. And also, even for rubrics itself, maybe even if we don't wait in a short period of time, maybe we haven't come up to the stage where we're using AI. I think the rubric itself, the rest of the studies, yeah, whenever there are new intervention, there are new pedagogy, yeah, or even in MOE, let's say ETD, they are introducing new tools, yeah, new software tools or new design principles, yeah, for SLS, or maybe CPDD, they're coming up with new curriculum, and then the teachers supposed to recommend teachers to design their lesson in this way or in what way. And even AST, they are going to do PD on new pedagogy. They can also consider design rubrics to help the teachers, yeah, to guide the teachers who are either using these tools, using this new curriculum, or maybe they go to the PD, yeah, to design this. This is another recommendation we make. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just now I talked about this e-portfolio. E-portfolio, NIE's e-portfolio, the two of the previous studies are all evaluative study. How about we do intervention study? Can we strategize the leveling up of pre-service teachers, meta-cognitive skills and self-regulation in maintaining and optimizing learning by e-portfolio activities? We do something more than that, rather than just make sure that the teachers do the e-portfolio, maintain their learning e-portfolio based on the studio guidelines and the L story. Yeah, can we do something more than that? Can we derive pedagogy? Even thinking about, let's say we can do seamless learning way of doing this e-portfolio, because this is across time, across subject kind of e-portfolio maintenance. This also have a sense of seamless learning in it. So we can derive pedagogy for NIE instructors to tap on student e-portfolio, so the teacher can actually purposefully use e-portfolio, their e-portfolio to design activities. Yeah, rather than okay, you just throw everything you have submitted, your assignments, everything into the e-portfolio, and that's all. We can also design new ICT tools to support e-portfolio activities. Even let's say try to find a connection between one assignment and another assignment. You can then connect them, and then they can do something with these two assignments. They put together, they consolidate the knowledge, consolidate the skills. Yeah, we can also facilitate teachers' continual maintenance of e-portfolio after joining in-service teaching force. After they graduated from NIE, they join the in-service teacher. Integrate e-portfolio into SLS, student learning space run by MOE. So this is another possibility. That means that their e-portfolio, every teacher, they have e-portfolio running at the background, and then whatever lesson plans they design, the teacher design, or learning materials design over there, they also connect to their own e-portfolio, so that they can maintain in that way. So this is another. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, teacher related. We want to research to. I think this part is also mine. Yeah. We want to unpack how techno-pedagogical practices are enacted in and out of classroom. Because this is something that inspired us to come out with this recommendation was core research. Core research NIE. For those who are not familiar with this, yeah, because NIE folks are supposed to know what it is, but then many of them not. Because the core research is actually a series of very high level and very high stack and evergreen kind of research being carried out by NIE for almost 20 years. Every time I think we have about 4 to 5 years every period. So now I think we're already in our fourth, if I'm not wrong, it's already our fourth stage of this core research. The original idea was that they sent a lot of researchers into classroom, yeah, to kind of observe teachers teaching, and then we try to do qualitative analysis to see how teachers in Singapore as a whole, yeah, their common teaching practice. And not only that, they're also conducting quantitative studies, statistical research, and doing questionnaire to find the relationship between, let's say, the students and teachers' perceptions, and also students' learning practice and how they relate to their learning outcome. Yeah, so we have all this very big scale of study, and all these are baseline, very evaluative type of study. I would say baseline study, either descriptive or evaluative, doesn't matter. So, but now, because of the rise of blended learning, actually there's a whole new kind of scenario we're looking at. We want to study in a different way, not in the original core research way, because core research is very much classroom focused, and also very much, and most of the time actually they are teacher focused. Yeah, so now we want to look at students aspect, we want to look at out of class aspect, we want to see how this learning could take place cross-contextually, especially with technological support or in and out of technology. Sometimes they even they're doing it, even if you're studying at home, it doesn't necessarily means that you always have to stick to the screen. You can do off-screen activities. So there are other things we have. And then, okay, so we want to analyze the multi-modal teaching and learning data across this under the lenses akin to different types of learning sciences of technology, such as the ICT for meaningful learning, just like I talked about affordance theory, TPAC, seamless learning, or Diana Rolirot's conversational framework. We want to avoid overly teaching-centric. It means that we don't just focus too much on teachers. but we want to see students as well. Teacher-student interaction and also student-student interaction, also students' individual learning. These are trajectory. So we want to, beyond analysis of actual teaching and learning process, we want to unpack all these systemic factors, teacher perception, teacher PD, which is, we go back to the slide just now. I talked about this model with the challenges, teaching challenges with these 4 factors that how to bring together all these different challenges. So we want to unpack all these factors, how these factors can affect teachers' teaching and students' learning. Okay, next slide. I think that should be Peter's one.
All right. Okay, so what we also found is that for teacher relatedness, a general outcome of our RLS was that teachers was engaged in practice-oriented research activities. And actually what they've done, actually they have gained or improved their abilities to understand students' needs, monitoring, and also are being more sensitive to students' progress, as well as innovating and customizing and refining their teaching practices at the same time. So in a way, teachers were, through this process, even as they engaged in research, they were encouraged in the process, in the practice of scientifically collecting and interpreting evaluation data, and also what they accomplish or achieve a much deeper professional learning. So as we also found that actually many of these researchers they did, they also participated in iterative processes of identifying students' needs and problems of practice, lesson design and planning. So many times they told that they tried again and then they changed their approaches and all that. So there was actually an iterative patterns of how they were actually learning. So they also enacted lessons and analysis outcomes. And these iterative processes let them improve their outcomes in understanding the students' learning needs. So what we want to do is actually to recommend for teachers to continue to be engaged in this inquiry process to improve their specific designs, instructional styles along the way. So this approach actually goes beyond the current policy. Maybe policies that we just think as teachers are designers, but also aims to develop teachers more holistically by situating them in ongoing practice of teacher inquiry learning. So they are not just being content designers or enacting lessons, but also checking on students, even assessment results by being able to read, interpret the teaching and learning processes even more profoundly. And also at the same time, engaging themselves actually in more iterative inquiry process in the design. So what we also encourage is that so to support these measures of being teachers to be as researchers or co-researchers, perhaps the academies of teachers, AST and NIE could offer more relevant courses to equip in-service teachers the process and methodological skills needed to carry out their own research. So NIE also may train pre-service teachers in this aspect. So furthermore, a new scheme or new teacher research grant could be launched to encourage and facilitate teachers in taking initiatives in engaging local or overseas university researchers or even MOE officers to forge research collaboration by solving teacher-identified teaching problems or practice. So collaborating with researchers or specialists may help the teachers to reframe the problems and therefore reformulate the solutions if necessary. And so at this outcome, we also perhaps more dialogues between teachers and MOE officers could also help teachers to better comprehend, to help one another to better comprehend the curricular teaching materials, assessment, and ICT policies than being trapped in inaccurate perceptions and wrong prioritization, which could undermine the innovative efforts on both sides. So we also encourage actually dialogues even between researchers and the ongoing research between MOE, AST, and NIE in brokering, identifying and areas of problems of practice, and also looking to how ICT can actually address these problems of practice. Right. So another thing that we recommend is actually the study of uptakes and sustainment of ICT innovations. So a good portion of our review studies focus on the design implementation of ICT innovations in the classroom. In most of the studies, actually participants shared their teaching practices, approaches, and outcomes of innovation to other teachers. Oops, sorry. This was done through various channels such as learning network communities, professional learning communities, this EduLab workshops, open classroom observations, even Excel Fest. These channels are actually good opportunities for teachers to learn and adapt the innovations or the ideas in the classrooms. So it'll be useful for us to understand how these uptakes of innovations occur among teachers, and what makes a teacher adopt innovation, and what adaptations do teachers actually make, and what type of supports are given, and the contextual factors that will sustain the uptakes in the school. So understanding these uptakes will help us to design, implement leverages that will spread the use of innovation organically among the teachers and schools. So like through the SLS, even all teachers and students even has common platform or teaching and learning. Perhaps we can understand through research on how uptakes of the lesson ideas and innovativity of SLS by teachers takes place, and what are adaptations do teachers would make. So this will better promote the widespread use of even SLS among the teachers. So what we know that from the LAS, many ICT innovations were actually catalysts for schools to innovate new pedagogical practices with ICT in classroom. However, little is known about the sustainability of the innovations after the end of the study. We recommend studies to better understand what those factors are in sustaining the pedagogical practices after the completion of the projects, or the life after for teachers and students in using ICT without researchers' assistance, or even when actually the project has ended. So what makes a school maybe drop an innovation or cease using it are things that actually we should try to understand, and so that we could actually design leverages to actually continue to sustain innovations in schools and in classroom. So in this LES, we have systematically actually reviewed 126 ICT-based studies that are awarded through the ERFP, EduLab, NEF, which revealed actually multiple faceted perspectives and hypotheses of ICT use in learning and teaching in the context of the classroom and local context in Singapore, and how actually they were supported even at a systemic level, like school leaders. So from our synthesis, actually we propose the development of future-ready smart learning environments from multidisciplinary research, and also how ICT-transformed teacher education, such as using AI to help the design of lessons, even can design of lessons, even how can we trace even the sustainment and actually the uptakes of ICT innovation, and also this will also help us in how studies and interventions can help to improve NIE's portfolio initiatives for pre-service teachers. So these are some of our recommendations, and we hope that through this presentation, it will provide you some ideas and insights as to how, as a researcher, whether you're a researcher or a policymaker or a teacher, we give some insight as to how it will actually help you to furthering areas of research or areas of practice using ICT. Also, we thank you for taking this time even to attend our presentation. Thank you. So I think I'll pass this time back to Julie.
Great. On that note, I think it is a very good point for us to close these sessions. I mean, our partnership with teachers has gone a long time, and we're grateful for all the teachers, all the schools who have supported our research, and we look forward for more of such collaboration and partnership, and hopefully really developing on both ends. I think the nexus between the research and practice is evergreen, is always so important. So with this note, I want to thank the panelists, and I want to thank the audience for staying with us. Just a quick note on the next coming up in our new education norm webinar series. We have Dr. Sherry C from who will be talking supporting informal STEM learning at home. So please join us on 24th of August to get the information into this interesting topic on STEM education. And also, just before we end, I think our OER colleague has very kindly put up the link in the chat. Please give us feedback to keep this webinar series going in this new education norm as we sustain our work into this new norm. What does it look like? Please give us some feedback so that we can keep the conversation going. And with this, we thank all the audience, the participant and the panelists, and we'll have a good weekend ahead, and we'll say bye-bye for now.